Welcome to Blockchain All-Star Series. I'm your host, Layla Gulen. Blockchain and distributed ledger technology are at the forefront of the Internet 3.0 era, where the technology can enable trusted and transparent sharing of data and digital assets. Though the technology is still at its early stage, who makes up the constellation of innovators, guiding us through the digital revolution powered by blockchain? Well, today we're joined by one of those stars, Medha Parlikar, CTO and co-founder of CasperLabs. And CasperLabs maintains Casper, an open source blockchain optimized for enterprise and developer adoption. First of all, Medha, I want to thank you so much for joining us. And, it's always a treat to speak with innovators in technology, but particularly women in technology.
Thank you so much for having me on. I'm really excited to be here.
Well, let's go ahead and kind of start at the beginning. I'm curious how exactly you got yourself started in tech.
Gosh, this is a great story. It's a great question, actually. So my dive into technology started very, very early in life. My father introduced me to technology right at the dawn of personal computing, right? So this was in the early 80s. And we were building a computer in the basement. My father told me that, honey, this is where you need to be focusing your attention because this is the future. Computers are going to form the basis of everything that the world is going to operate on, and you need to understand how they work. And so we spent quite a bit of time building the computer, debugging programs written in MS-DOS 1.0. He made sure I had a personal computer on my desktop. I was the only kid in college that had a PC and was using word processing systems way before anybody else did, right? This is still early 80s. And I think that really formed my basis for technology. It took me a long time to actually realize that I was a bit of an outlier in that I had exposure to it so much sooner than any of my counterparts did. And I think that really manifested for me in the 90s when the internet started really taking off.
Well, your father was quite the visionary, it sounds like.
Indeed, he was. He really was.
Was he also involved in technology himself? I mean, it sounds like he was technologically inclined.
He definitely was technologically inclined. I mean, I remember my father, ripping MP3s back in the late 2000s, and he was well into his 70s by that point. He was definitely a visionary and very interested in technology, but he himself was a civil structural engineer. So I grew up around the discipline of engineering from the time I was really, really young.
And you said you were the only student at your college that had a personal computer. Where did you attend college?
I went to school at University of Western Ontario in Canada. And I actually studied biology, like a traditional Indian girl. I was going to become a doctor. I didn't actually go to school for computer science. Actually, my entire technical career started pretty late. It was after I had the epiphany that I actually had a natural aptitude for technology. Quite by accident, I discovered this late in life that it was because of that early exposure. I had almost 15 years of computers before most people even understood how they worked.
That's incredible. And so once you made this discovery, how long did it take you to land your first job in tech? And where was that?
So the way it actually started is after I got married and I moved to San Diego, I needed a job and I started working in a construction company, believe it or not, because my father was a civil structural engineer. So I started working for them doing contract management. And at that time, they were laying network cable for Novell 3.11. Windows 3.1 had just come out. And it was 1995 and it was the dawn of the internet. You had AOL dial-up and cell phones were just starting to take hold. And the computer consultant that came in would always lean on me to help him. And he looked at me and he's like, kiddo, you've really got a knack for these things. And so I went back to school to learn computer programming at that time. I was 23. Oh, gosh, I was probably 25 years old at the time. And so I went back to school, learned computer programming, and then got my first job working at Jostens Learning, building educational software. I started off as a customer support representative, answering calls and helping customers on the front lines, and then quickly moved into software engineering, where I did the Y2K maintenance. So there was a big scare about Y2K. And the dot-com boom was just taking off. So I left that company to go work at mp3.com, and I joined as the founding member of their quality control group. And I quickly became the director of quality control, quality assurance for MP3.com. And I learned a ton about actually Web 2.0. MP3.com was really way ahead of the curve in terms of what they were building. So I learned about continuous integration, continuous deployment. I learned all about Apache, Red Hat, Linux, everything I learned there in the short, 2 years that I was working there. And that really bootstrapped everything I learned about software as a service, because MP3.com was pumping out 25 to 30 projects a week through their continuous integration pipeline. So it was really way ahead of the game in terms of what it was trying to do. It was literally a YouTube combined with Apple Music at the time.
Wow.
So I was really, really, very lucky to benefit from all of that experience and expertise.
Well, it sounds like you went from the construction job that you had, and then you really found your niche. But you may have had a few years there where someone who had maybe been studying computer science was already in that field, but you still managed to get kind of at the forefront of a lot of technology that was burgeoning at that time.
Yes, very, very lucky indeed. I feel like I happened to be at the right place at the right time. And I think, because I had so much experience with technology and how it worked, right? It just really came very, very naturally to me. I didn't realize at the time that I was that much of an outlier. But again, computer programming came pretty easily to me. And when it comes to computer science, I had already worked with computer science and all the principles and foundations of computers. So I didn't realize, that I had all the computer science fundamentals that I needed, because I was building this computer in my basement with my father, and the memory cards, basically the computer cards were this big, and the computer had its own closet. And so all of the computer science fundamentals I needed to know, we already had, I already had them, and I had come by them just through a completely different avenue.
Did you ever think that going from storing a computer in a closet, that we would go from that to these handheld devices that can do just about everything?
I used to watch Star Trek, so I completely believe it, They had those little notepads, right? And now we have iPads. It's exactly right. So, I'm firmly a believer in silicon, right? Silicon really enables these leaps and bounds, right? So the silicon that is now the iPads, the silicon that has enabled phenomenal amounts of storage, right? At MP3.com, we were blown away that we were able to create 1 terabyte of liquid storage. We had that in 1999. Nowadays, it's, you can get a terabyte. It's about this big, right? It's the size of a fancy purse, if that. And I believe that it will continue. There will continue to be major advancements in silicon and bandwidth and processing speed that will enable the next generation of computing.
Well, I think this is a great segue, because you're talking about being on the front lines of all this new technology back in the 90s and the early aughts. So getting into the blockchain space, this is becoming more and more common in the global lexicon. I think we still have a little ways to go. Lay people such as myself are just kind of learning about it now. But how did you find yourself in this particular space, going from MP3.com and Adobe and these other companies to blockchain?
Well, it's a really interesting story in terms of how I fell into the space, because I quite literally fell into it. When I completed my tour at Avalara in 2016, I was taking a break because Avalara had been a very, very intense company to work in. I had been with the company from employees, about 150 employees, all the way up to 1,100 employees. And it was just a crazy ride. And I really felt like I needed a bit of a break. And during that time, a friend of mine who happened to be running, received a contract. He had a startup. He received a contract from an open source cooperative project to basically build a public blockchain. And I knew him from Avalara. He's a good, close personal friend of mine. And he said, when I need engineering leadership, can I call you? And I said, absolutely. I said, there's some things that I'm really good at. This is something I can absolutely do for you. And so that day came, and he said, Medha, it was about August of 2017. He's like, Medha, I need your help. I've now got, 4 or 5 developers that I'm managing, and I just can't manage them anymore. Will you come and manage this team for me? And I said, sure. I wasn't working on anything at that time. And it sounded like a great work from home opportunity. And I've been working from home for almost, I've been working from home for almost 14 years now. So for me, COVID was absolutely nothing.
You're way ahead of the rest of us.
Yeah, I've been working from home for a very, very long time. And so I said, sure, this sounds like a great opportunity. And it was a blockchain project. And so I worked on that blockchain project, for about, let me think here. It was just about a little over a year. It was from August to about September, August 2017 till about September of 2018 when I worked on that project. And we were able to bring that blockchain, I was able to bring that blockchain to testnet status. And after that point, we had gotten wind of some governance challenges on that project. So there was some mismanagement of funds. There were definitely financial issues on the project, and a lot of the developers were going to be let go. So at that point in time is around the time when Renal approached me. Renal was one of the investors in the project. And so he approached me to co-found CasperLabs along with other individuals.
Oh, I see. So you co-founded CasperLabs in 2018. Here we are in 2021. And I want to eventually talk about blockchain and for you to break down what it is, the idea behind decentralization and all of that. But, throughout this process, it sounds like you had a lot of support from your colleagues, your coworkers, your peers. And for anybody who's watching this, young women who are interested in breaking into this industry, did you ever have any challenges associated with you being a woman in technology?
I actually did. So it's interesting. There are challenges that I was aware of, and there were challenges I was unaware of. So I think we'll just talk about the challenges. There are challenges that I was unaware of. I think is a little bit more interesting because you think about the typical challenges where you're the only female in the room. You may not have as much, female camaraderie because there's just a lot of men. And ironically, I was so used to that. My father grew up in construction. I was used to being in a more male-dominated, industries, if you will. So I wasn't particularly uncomfortable with the fact that I didn't have a lot of female companionship at work. And I wasn't necessarily uncomfortable with the testosterone in the room. But the funny thing is more often than not, the place where I struggled the most was in my own power. And so when I talk to other women that want to either aspire to be leaders or aspire to, be leaders in a male-dominated industry, the big piece of advice I give them is just know your own power and believe in yourself. And understand that you have more of the answers than you may give yourself credit to. And how many times have you thought that, I really should say something, but I didn't? So the big piece of advice that I give women more often than not is that, find your own power and believe in yourself more than you would otherwise, right? You're capable of a lot more than you believe.
Yeah, I would imagine that there's a lot of self-doubt because when you are in a room with maybe your male counterparts, it can be rather intimidating. But I think more and more girls are kind of being brought up in the STEM study platform. So do you feel that because they're getting an earlier start in that field, that they're finding their voice a little bit earlier than, say, women who started out in the days that you started out?
I think it's actually a separate concern from the STEM piece. So I think the STEM piece is definitely an educational component to where they're comfortable and they're not lagging behind the boys in class, right? Because it actually, women exited technology with the advent of the personal computer, believe it or not, because the personal computer wound up being on the desks of boys. And it was this very, very subtle gender bias that kind of crept its way in. Before the personal computing revolution, women and men were about 50-50%. If you think about technology, right? The early mathematicians, the early computer scientists, it really, really did follow just the demographic of population that you had about 50% women, 50% men in technology. And the reason for that is they had equal access, right? They had equal access. Once the personal computing phase started, the PCs wound up on the desks of boys more often than girls. And so by the time they got to high school or college, they were way, way ahead of their female counterparts, and the women just didn't feel comfortable. I think absolutely getting girls into STEM programs is really key. I tell all my friends, if you have a daughter, teach her how to do algorithms, teach her how to code, expose her to it as much as you possibly can. And I think for women to find their own power, it's really just about them feeling like they're empowered to take a risk, empowered to speak up, empowered to have that voice. And I think that does happen very early on. For me, it was a big cultural issue as well, right? I come from a traditional Indian family. And so culturally, I'm a little bit of an enigma. Even in my community, I'm a pretty big enigma. A lot of people didn't even know what it is I did when you think about me socially, right? So very much a dichotomy that way, yes.
But you're certainly lauded for it today. So
yes. What can I say?
That's what matters. That's all that matters. But, and some people have altruistic reasons for this, but I just want to take a couple steps back. And when you were starting to carve your path in technology, and finding yourself deeper and deeper in this space, technology and engineering, what were your goals as you set forth and as you just found yourself going farther and farther along?
Yeah. So I was catapulted into a leadership position very, very early in my career. So I've been working in technology for about 20 to 25 years, several decades. And I would say that almost from the onset, I was, kind of designated to be a leader. And so for me, one of my big goals is to be the best possible leader I can. So, I think about Jim Collins' good to great type of level 5 leaders. For me personally, being the kind of leader that, every single member of my team feels comfortable talking to, telling me what's wrong, being the kind of leader that builds an organization where people are thrilled to come to work at, people are, think about, this is just an incredible place to work. I can do my very best work here. I can grow. I can learn. I can achieve things that, will deliver value to customers and investors, but also things that I can then build value for myself as an individual. To me, that's the growth trajectory I always wanted to be on. I really gain a lot of energy, I would say, from delivering solutions for customers in the form of software, right? So I get really excited about building features and seeing the customer's face light up when I say, well, this is a feature that we built for you. And they're like, yes, I've been looking for that, right? So that really gets me excited. It's what I really
That must be very satisfying.
It really is. It really is.
So it's not just intellectual, but it's the culture that you create within the workspace. And then going beyond the walls of CasperLabs. Well, one of the words that popped out for me, of course, was leadership. But if you could describe yourself in 3 words, what would they be?
So this is a great question. So for this question, I actually asked several people in my immediate circle across coworkers and family. And so here's what they said. I felt a bit strange answering this question by myself. So I'm happy to say that several of them said I'm tenacious or determined. One of them referred to me as courageous, and the last one referred to me as caring.
Well, those are all wonderful characteristics.
They are. They're wonderful characteristics. Yeah, I'm very flattered by it.
And you put them all together, and I think that spells leader and leadership, certainly. Besides your father, obviously, he had a huge impact on you from a very early age. Would you say that you had other role models that you wanted to follow in their footsteps, or took bits and pieces of different people that you've applied to your own development?
Yeah, so definitely, I would say more than taking bits and pieces in terms of a mentor, I've had people that have really materially shaped who I am. And I think that's probably a more powerful statement than saying that I actively, selected a mentor and said, I wanted to be like this person or wanted to be like that person. But I can definitely say that, 2 other big people or groups of people that have shaped me is, one is my husband and the other one are my children. So I think, in my life, the 2 other big influences in terms of making me the person that I am today, I would say are those 2 broad categories, right? Namely, my middle daughter, all 3 of my kids, and then my husband, in addition to my father.
Isn't that amazing? Once you have children, that you tend to learn so much from them.
You really
There's
do.
a lot that they can teach us.
It's really a tremendous gift. You learn, in having children, you learn more about yourself than anything else. They hold up a mirror and they really show you what you're all about.
No filter either. They're very, very honest.
No filter. They're actually engineered and designed to teach you about yourself. They literally, I think they're just built that way to teach you about yourself. Yeah.
Indeed. And they say that often failures are what bring about success. Would you say that you've had many failures? Is there any one in particular that stands out for you?
Yeah, there is a really big one that stands out for me. This is a great question. I don't think I've ever had anybody ask me this question. So, probably one of my biggest failures, I would say, actually came at Avalara, my most recent, corporate job, I would say. And at that company, I was a senior engineering executive. Scott McFarlane has had dinner at my kitchen table. He and I are on a first name basis. I was one of the core executives there. And I wound up being moved out of the organization, close to at the end of my tenure, at the end of 6 years. And one of the big takeaways for that was, from my perspective, what I learned about it is I didn't take that agency. I had a lot more agency, agency, I guess is the best way I can describe it, to do the things that I needed to do for the product and my staff while I was running, a multidisciplinary team called Content Research and Engineering. Mm-hmm. And when I was running that content research and engineering group, I ran into, a bit of a conflict with another key engineering director in the organization. And I knew what they were building wasn't going to work. And yet I wasn't enough in my own power to take the steps that I knew I needed to take to do the right thing by my staff and by my people, and broadly by the company, even though I had been empowered to do that. And that was really the mistake that I made, is that I really need to, and rather than blaming my situation, my circumstances, my boss, whatever, I should have just taken much more agency at that time. And that was really a huge takeaway for me. And I would say it was that same agency that I learned when working in the open source project that ultimately resulted in the founding of CasperLabs. So I think you're absolutely correct that, success comes out of that failure, right? If I hadn't learned those lessons and gone through the challenges I went through at Avalara, I don't think I would have ever taken the leap of faith to found CasperLabs.
And, I'm not a fan of the word weaknesses, but, everybody's got an Achilles heel. Would you say that you have one of those? I mean, certainly. Oh yeah, I've got several. But yeah,
no, I definitely have. Like, I definitely have. We all have flaws, right? So yeah, I mean, I find that I can tend to be a little bit too forceful, a little too blunt, sometimes not as approachable as I'd like. And if I want to be ultimately like a level 5 leader, I think being very approachable is massively important. I want to, make sure that people feel that they can talk to me about things that I may not even want to hear, because not being able to receive that feedback is a big problem. As a leader in an organization, you need to know what's going wrong, and people need to feel comfortable telling you, hey, you know what, you screwed up, you did something wrong, you shouldn't have done this, you shouldn't have done that. So I think that's definitely a weakness. It's something that I'm constantly working on to try to make myself more approachable, a little less forceful, a little less blunt. Also, I think I learn by doing, not reading. My daughter's able to learn by reading. And I think anybody that can learn something by reading has this massive superpower, right? But for me, I learn by doing. I have to actually, work with whatever technology it is that I'm trying to learn about, or whatever skill it is I'm trying to learn. I have to actually do it in order to learn it. And so for me, that makes it's a harder way to learn. So for me,
it takes a little bit longer sometimes.
It does. Like school, I did a lot of writing and I did a lot of typing, because that's just the way I would absorb the information versus just reading it. And sometimes I tend to make snap decisions, and that can lead to mistakes. So I try to be a little bit more measured and thoughtful in my approach as much as possible. But right. Definitely growth areas.
Yeah, absolutely. And working for other companies, it does have its advantages. There are also some drawbacks. What was it about becoming an entrepreneur that has kept you in this position? You said, again, you find yourself to be a leader just by nature. That's your nature. And my other side to this question is, are entrepreneurs born or are they made?
So this is this is a great question. So I do think a lot of entrepreneurs or a lot of leaders are firstborns, right? Like they're in the hierarchy, they're the eldest child. So that I am definitely an eldest child. I think leaders are born out of that. With respects to entrepreneurs, gosh, I think that they're much more risk takers. I think firstborns do tend to be risk takers. They kind of have to carve a path, right, for their siblings. They don't necessarily have things worked out for them. Definitely with my first daughter, we were figuring things out with her. So she had to put up with a lot more with us than say her siblings had to. And I think my parents would say the same thing about me is like, yeah, we didn't really know what we were doing with you. We just kind of figured it out. And so, firstborns tend to be a little bit more adaptable. They can kind of, they can cut that path. And so I think that gives them some skills to be entrepreneurs. I don't actually know what the statistics are for that though. Yeah.
That would be an interesting thing to find out though. It really would. And I can see your point. Just being the first to experience or do certain things, you kind of have to be fearless. And would you say that you are a fearless person?
I wouldn't say that I'm a fearless person. I definitely, founding CasperLabs was really me kind of like taking that big step and taking that big risk. And, my co-founders really did make it really easy for me. They were very supportive. I felt like we had a great team. As you said, I was supported by my peers, supported by my family. So that definitely helped a lot. And we were at a point in our life where it felt like I just kind of knew that this was something that I was supposed to do. So I wouldn't necessarily say that I'm fearless. One thing I will say is that I do embrace change. I feel like the only purpose in life is to learn and grow and change. So change is the only constant. And I felt like doing this, it would give me an opportunity to grow and learn. And so embracing that felt like really natural to me.
What advice do you have for people who may be a little bit more stagnant, a little bit more staid in their thinking? How do you break out of that?
How do they break out of that? Well, I think the first thing is agency, right? You can definitely don't believe you're stuck by your circumstance. You're really not. Every single day you wake up in the morning, you have a choice. And we have a choice on how we want to live. We can live in joy and agency, or we can choose to live in a state of victimhood and despair. And I think, you really can shape your life, and you have a lot more control than we think we do, right? That was the big takeaway for me from Avalara, is that I had a lot more agency than I even gave myself. And I think you see a lot of people that way think that they can't change their circumstance. In some cases, it's really, really hard for them to change their circumstance. But sometimes if you want to make a real drastic change in your circumstance, you have to make a drastic choice, right? And it's easier said than done. It didn't say it was going to be easy, but I think, anything worth having is going to take a lot of effort and probably, taking a big step, right? You're going to make a big step in a different direction.
Right. A very wise friend of mine put it this way, that, to make any kind of progress, you do have to experience some failure. One may be somewhat fearful, but if you do, you can use that scar tissue to better the next generation. So whatever it is that you've experienced and maybe it went wrong, you can make it right, and you can help the next crop come up to do the same thing and make it even better.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. Fear of failure is a very natural thing. It doesn't come easily to us. And certainly from my cultural background, you're not supposed to ever say you don't know, and you're not supposed to fail, and everything's supposed to go a straight line. But I can tell you that you learn a lot more from failing than having never tried. So, sometimes 100%. Taking that leap, even though knowing that you're going to fail, it's okay, but at least you tried. And that is something that we've even tried to embody in our children, we're here as a safety net. If you fail, we'll catch you, but by all means, go try. And even similarly, in the company at CasperLabs, failure is not admonished, right? So we try something. It's okay if you make a mistake. It's okay if you screw up. It's okay as long as you learn from it. Go ahead and try again, right? So we definitely. Failure is an important way to learn. It's an important route to learning. For sure.
I love the culture that you've developed there at CasperLabs. Let's talk about CasperLabs, shall we?
Sure.
I did promise our audience that we were going to dive into this, but if you could, just to give us a sense of what blockchain is and the idea behind decentralization.
Oh, yeah. So blockchain, the way I like to think about blockchain is it's a technology that creates a layer of trust over information, right? So as an example, today, if you go to Wikipedia or if you go to a source of information, can you really trust that information? Do you know who authored that information? Do you know when it was authored? Do you know the reputation of the individual that authored it? How do you know that it's real? How do you know it hasn't been edited or modified and when it was modified? All of this information right now is stored on central servers, and it can potentially be modified by whoever controls that technology and that information. And I think in this day and age, consumers and the broader populace are looking for more trust and transparency, right? And so I look at blockchain as a technology whereby if you register a piece of information with the blockchain protocol, you can then trust it, right? You then know when it was added, who added it, what their reputation is. And you can also have some guarantees around the fact that it hasn't been modified since that date. Or if it has been modified, how it has been modified, who modified it, why did they modify it, and so on and so forth. So I look at HTTP. Yeah, the internet protocol is an information protocol, right? And I see the blockchain protocol as a trust protocol.
Okay. And then taking blockchain and how it applies to what you do at CasperLabs. So explain to us what Casper is and just how it all works.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So when we talk about blockchain protocols, we talk about decentralization, much like BitTorrent, right? That was the other half of the previous question. Right. So you think about BitTorrent, there is no head. There is nobody in charge. Right. These are a bunch of clones of each other run by individual people. And there really isn't any one person that controls anything. Right. And why does that matter? Well, it matters because everybody keeps a separate copy of everything. Right. So it's not like one person controls everything and tells the other people to make the copies. The copies happen by themselves independently of each other. And so there's no trust within the network. And because nobody trusts each other within the network, they all independently verify everything. Therefore, you can trust the data that is stored on the blockchain network itself, right? And so CasperLabs is a professional services software company, and our initial charter was to build the software that powers the Casper network. And the Casper network is a public, permissionless, decentralized blockchain protocol that supports what we like to call programmable money or smart contracts. And these are programs that perform some kind of computation and register the outcome of that program running on the blockchain. So it does something, the smart contracts will do something, and whatever that thing it is they do, they register the output of that on the blockchain within a block. And CasperLabs is a company that wrote that technology.
Oh, interesting. Where do you see not just the technology, but your company in, say, 5 to 10 years from now?
Yeah. So, I would love to see us having many hundreds of employees and hundreds of customers that we have supported through go lives using the Casper technology. Companies like IPWE that are creating a patent marketplace, or Metacask that's creating a rare whiskey marketplace, and other e-commerce providers that are looking to uplift their e-commerce solutions using blockchain technology, right? Or innovative companies that want to build a decentralized Uber or a decentralized Airbnb, and figuring out a way to actually build a business around that while enabling consumer-to-consumer transactions, right? I feel like there's going to be a new class of transactions that are going to emerge from this decentralized protocols.
And do you see this being easily put in the hands of people like myself?
Absolutely, I do. I really do. And there's some really exciting technologies that we're working to integrate into the Casper protocol that will make it very, very easy for end users to integrate with the blockchain and use the blockchain. I believe that wallet technology and additional enhancements around, public and private key management that will make it super easy for you to securely interact with the blockchain without fearing, loss or theft of your cryptocurrency is possible. Absolutely.
technology, it has its growing pains. What do you think are the learning curves for people to eventually then jump on board and understand and embrace blockchain technology and making it work for them?
Yeah, I actually I'm of the opinion that blockchain should actually kind of fade to the back, right? Kind of like it should be so easy to use. It's as easy to use as the iPhone, right? Like nobody actually worries about the HTTP protocol that powers the internet. We just get the benefit of it, right? We get the benefit of mobile technology. We get the benefit of the internet protocol, of TCP/IP and of HTTP. So it shouldn't be the user's problem, honestly, right? So if we do our work correctly and we build all the tooling we need to build around the blockchain protocol, users will only get the benefit of it. What are the benefits? Like, I have my personally identifiable information stored in a key that I control, and I don't have to worry about other companies leaking my information onto the dark web. As a wonderful, wonderful use case, right? I also have the benefit of, if I build reputation on a system, my reputation isn't locked up on that system. I can own my own reputation. It's my reputation. I can do with it what I want, versus building reputation on Uber and then Uber just arbitrarily deciding what to do with your reputation, or Twitter arbitrarily deciding what to do with your followers or whatever, right? You own it yourself. It is part of your collateral. You work to earn it. Why shouldn't you get to own it? Those kinds of benefits should ultimately come back to consumers, and the underlying technology will be blockchain technology. But honestly, I don't feel that they need to interact with it directly.
Yeah, because we hear a lot of examples being thrown around in terms of artists, and having those digital works of art being able to collect royalties if it gets shared, share after share after share, that it's not just a one and done sale for you, but you actually get to continually earn based on the popularity of what you've created.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great example. It's a wonderful example of blockchain technology. Exactly. Okay. Of tokenization.
Yeah, right. Exactly. All right. So we have 3 entrepreneurial quotes, and we're curious which one you might identify with the most. So let me read each one, and then you can tell us which one you identify with. But here's the first one, quote: "The function of leadership is to produce more leaders, not more followers." Here's the second one: "Surround yourself with people who complement your skills and let them run." And here's the third one, quote: "You don't choose your passions choose you." Which one of those would you say you identify with the most?
I would say I identify with 2 the most, as the one I agree with, but I would actually change it to say, surround yourself with people that are much smarter than you and let them run. So I feel very blessed to not just find people that compliment me. I think Mernal, my co-founder, compliments me, but in a lot of ways, I think he's a lot smarter than I am. And definitely my core engineering team is way smarter than me. And so I have this role in service to them. They actually are the ones that make us so successful at CasperLabs. But yeah, definitely that I like to be around people that are definitely smarter than me.
Well, you certainly have the depth and breadth of experience in this industry, and you could probably write a book about it. If you were to write a book, what do you think the title would say?
So if the book was about me, which I would never write a book about myself.
Let's say it's a biography. It's not an autobiography.
Yeah, it's okay. If there was a biography. So I think the word that comes to mind most, and I asked my husband about this question, to be perfectly candid, is he would say enigma, right? There's a lot of people that think I'm very enigmatic. They really can't quite figure me out because I'm full of contradictions. If the more you get to know me, the more you realize that I'm full of dichotomies and contradictions in a lot of ways.
Yeah. Well, I would read it. And I think it would shoot up to the top of the New York Times bestseller list.
Oh gosh.
Finally, you did allude to this a little bit a few minutes ago, but if you could just reiterate what CasperLabs is working on, what's on the cusp, maybe on the horizon for your company, and what people can expect.
Yeah, so definitely, look look to see us penetrating the enterprise blockchain space. We are working with a lot of really exciting channel partners and bringing customers live using Casper technology. We're fully focused now on building like a core software development services organization, right? So that's really what our focus is. Of course, one of the big focuses for us is the public protocol. Still, we continue to support the Casper Association by providing software updates and services to the Casper Association. But then additionally, also building the developer community and working with the association to help support onboarding of developers onto the Casper network. So it's really, the story is we've built a protocol that we believe that enterprises will want to use. We've gotten fantastic customer feedback from them about what we've built. Now it's really about building real world use cases using this technology and getting them live.
And who are your typical clients, if I may ask?
Yeah, so we've got a pretty big variety of customers that we're working with, but I can definitely say that they are businesses that have real world customers and real world products and services that they're looking to offer. And they're looking to augment these with blockchain technology because they need to trust the data they're working with, or they're looking to create new marketplaces by tokenizing those things that were formerly difficult to manage or sell, or even completely ephemeral concepts that didn't exist before blockchain.
Oh, very interesting. Well, Medha Parlikar, I want to thank you so much for joining us. And for anybody who's interested in learning more about CasperLabs, where should they go?
They can check us out on our Telegram and, of course, our website, CasperLabs.io. You can catch all of our social channels there. And feel free to reach out, and you'll catch me on all those social channels. If you have any questions, I'm always here to answer them.
Well, thank you so much. You've been so generous with your time, and just a wonderful conversation with you.
Thank you so much. I thoroughly enjoyed it. Thanks so much for having me on.
Thank you so much. Well, that's going to do it for us on this episode of Blockchain All Stars. We hope you enjoyed it. Thanks again for watching. We'll see you next time.